Hello dear World of Warcraft friends, welcome back to another video on my channel. We had a Q&A with Ion Hazzikostas on Friday, and I'm sorry that I haven't summarized it sooner. I just didn't have time before. I wasn't around from Friday to Sunday. That's why everyone was allowed to join the Q&A, and you were also allowed to record the whole thing. But as I already said, since I wasn't there, I couldn't be present for it. And to be honest, I'll say this right away, I'm not a big fan of these Q&As. Critical questions are not tolerated there or filtered out in advance, and otherwise it's just like the Q&As in the WoW partner Discord. If you kiss up to Blizzard, your questions are very, very welcome, and you're welcome there, but otherwise not so much. But that's not the topic here. The Q&A brought in over 350 questions that you could submit in the end. That's why, yes, not all of them were answered. If you want to watch the whole thing again, Mr. GM streamed the entire event. It lasted about an hour, so you can check it out there. And the first part was this whole idea of one patch every 8 weeks. Because there was a lot of criticism, like Blizzard releases patches unfinished and with bugs. They say that nothing is set in stone, so it doesn't have to be every 8 weeks. This whole thing crystallized as a goal during Dragonflight, and they say that new content every 2 months feels pretty good. They tried to stagger content in the War Within, meaning to release it with delays, but players think game gating sucks, which I can definitely understand. That's why they want to avoid it. And according to current data, 50% of players say every 2 months is just right, 25% say it's too fast, and 25% say it's too slow. That's why they're sticking with this approach for now. Communication with the developers. In the end, they said that they want to connect players more directly with the developers and so on, and give more insight into this whole world that's being created. That means we'll most likely get more Q&As. The topic was that, for example, 12.1 will further improve the add-on API in terms of security. No idea why the thing about developer communication was specifically mentioned now. But yeah, apparently better communication is planned. Another big topic was guilds and all these, yes, social features and so on. Guilds are an important aspect of World of Warcraft, which is why they're bringing this Discord integration in 12.1. They want to make it easier in the future for people to visit each other. So you can visit and check out the different houses in housing and so on. They definitely want to change that as well. That fits with the topic of player agency, so things that players are asking for. For example, there's also the topic of reputations being warband wide. That was already announced. However, as Ian says, it's a very, very painful and lengthy process that takes a lot of time. That's why there aren't really many updates about it yet. Yes, PvP population is another topic. They want to grow the PvP player base. For example, people say that the MMR, which is the matchmaking rating, doesn't work that well. They want to improve things in the future. They also want to offer better content to high-rated PvP players in the future. However, they need to grow the PvP community first in order to justify this communication. Sounds to me like, yes, not that many people play PvP right now, so it's not super important for us to dedicate as much time to it as we do to PvE. To that they say it's also long overdue for new PvP talent updates. However, that won't happen with Season 2, and they're very, very happy with the pacing of PvP. So, rewards, then collections and remix was a topic. I already mentioned that in a separate video, so we'll keep this short. Legion remix wasn't the last remix, so there will be a new remix edition, however, it's not known when. And Collector's Bounty will be back as well. Again, no idea when, but at least it will return. Then the topic of rewards. Should things remain exclusive or not? Ian said that there is actually only a very, very small list of collectibles that are planned to remain exclusive. Otherwise, they are very open to bringing things back for real. And included on this list are, for example, the original challenge modes, along with the sets that came with them, the Mage Tower experiences, and so on and so forth. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe something will change about that, but currently I wouldn't have much hope that these things will come back. Professions were also a topic. He said that, for example, the secondary professions are long, long overdue for a new look. So, for example, cooking, fishing, and so on. Apparently, there are plans for the last Titan. Archaeology is something, and that somehow keeps coming up in this creator group. There are 3 people involved. They like the topic of archaeology. It just keeps coming up every damn time. He just says, yeah, it had cool lore, but most players just found it super boring, and the gameplay sucked. Yeah, so that's why archaeology hasn't come back so far. And then at the end, there were a few comments from Ian. He says he's really excited for patch 12.1, and he says everyone loves a good troll patch and a raid. I don't know. I'm not really hyped about this whole topic, even though I don't think the patch is bad, but that's definitely not because of the trolls. He also thanked the players for their passion and for the time they invest in all of this, and also for giving feedback. And then last question, puzzle box of Yogg-Saron, will it ever be opened? He says yes, it was opened in Hearthstone. Lol. So here too, as you can see, the whole thing is pretty random. And from my own experience, I know that the questions are submitted in advance, and Blizzard then sorts out which ones are too critical, which ones they don't want to have here. Certain topics aren't even brought up because I know from an English creator's experience, that certain topics weren't even asked about critically. But if it just doesn't fit in, then the whole thing won't be answered. So those questions are dismissed from the start. And yeah, that's why, in my opinion, it didn't have such a high priority. The new insights you could gain from this talk were honestly, well, not zero. The thing with remix and so on was pretty cool, but the rest was more like, it's always the same. Yeah, we have it on our radar. We'll take a look at it. And right, we can't say anything specific yet. So what do you think about it? Feel free to write it in the comments. Maybe it would have been interesting to ask when this bug will disappear, because apparently, even with the NVIDIA update, that hasn't happened yet, but it doesn't really matter. With that said, thank you for watching. See you in the next video, and take care.